Well, hello, everybody. This is Larry from the Blue Collar Nation podcast. Am I getting some funny feedback or is that just me?
Must be you.
All right, cool. Well, I'm going to start again because it's just riveting in my ears all of a sudden. I got to slow down. All right, anyway, here we go. Take two. Well, hello, everybody. This is Larry from the Blue Collar Nation podcast, and I'm with my riveting business partner, the tech whisperer, Mr. Sprague. What's happening, Eric? How are you today?
It's ironic that you're calling me riveting because you're usually telling me I'm going on and being boring you with details.
Yeah, well, I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt today, you know?
Okay. I'll take riveting.
Yep, right
I'll take it. We have a riveting guest today, actually.
Yes, and we're very excited about that. We're going to be talking to Chuck in just a moment, but we want to go over our sponsor, Morning Tech Meeting, which we talk about before every episode. And the one thing I want to hit on today, Morning Tech Meeting teaches the soft skills to your technicians to make your life easier, and how it benefited us in our business, which we modeled the Morning Tech Meeting system originally, was that it took, take the 10 problems that you have from your technicians that you have to tell them on a consistent basis, and it makes you a little crazy. We got rid of 7 or 8 of them within a month or two, and they went away because of the tech whispering lessons. He explained the why, and he connected with them, and they understood why they need to do those things that you request of them all the time. And all of a sudden the problems went away. The last 2 or 3, well, that was up to me. And I tried to pull out a bat, but Eric wouldn't let me do that. And he continued tech whispering, and it turned into the Morning Tech Meeting. So go to Morning Tech Meeting and check us out, and we can help your technicians make your life easier. Yep. And back to the Blue Collar Nation podcast. We have an amazing guest today, Chuck Violand. And Chuck wrote a killer book. We're very excited to go over it. Entrepreneurial Conspiracy. He's the author of a great book, and we're going to hit on that. He's the owner of Violand Management. Chuck has owned businesses for 40 years in the service business industry, and he's been coaching people for 34 years in the industry as well. And we are so happy to have you today, with us today, Chuck.
It's great to be with you. Thank you very much for having me.
Oh, well, second time guest, Larry.
Yes,
yeah.
Exactly.
Great to be back.
We have this book is so good. Both Eric and I read it. We're going to talk about it today. The Entrepreneurial Conspiracy hits the owner right where he needs to know the things that are so important. We're going to hit these topics today. So stay with us today. Listen to the end of the podcast because you are going to benefit dramatically with the content that's coming out of this book. So Eric, I'm excited enough. I'm going to give the floor to you and make it happen.
Well, we're excited to have Chuck Violand on today. Chuck's played a major role. Chuck, I don't know if you know this or not, played a major role just through Strategies for Success with Larry and I, because when I left your day of training, we never did not job cost a job once after that. Never. Wow. Every single, no matter how big or small, we job costed, and that changed our lives because before we were winging it as so many guys are, right? Like, you don't know what you don't know. So I just wanted to thank you for that. And then also for power selling, which we
power selling was amazing.
We still use to this day.
I turned that into a pineapple empire. I used the pineapples to give away to people when I would drop off to the routes. Yep. And I created a reputation for myself, and it was wonderful to have these silly hats that I wear. And I still wear them just because of your system right there.
Yeah. So anyway, Chuck, you made huge contributions to all home service industries, and we thank you for that. And 34 years, you're going to learn a thing or two, and it really showed in this book. So before we get into the book, Chuck, do you want to give us just a little of your background of those 40 years of owning it, or 50 years of being an entrepreneur? Like, where was your start? And I know you got into the restoration and cleaning industry. If you could just kind of give us a synopsis of how that happened for you.
Yeah. First of all, it's great to be here, guys. Thanks for inviting me back. As far as my own history goes in business, I started a food processing business out of school when I was very young. And I had that for a couple of years until it burnt down. But we made fresh breaded onion rings and frozen breaded mushrooms, sold them to the restaurant industry locally.
Whoa, Chuck. We can't just skim over the burned down parts. you got to give us a little bit of background.
It's going to be a good story.
Are we talking like smoldering building on the ground?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah, it was.
What happened?
Torched. It was torched. It was it was arson by a guy who wasn't real thrilled, apparently wasn't real thrilled with me and my partner, and burnt the building down. And you know, we're
Wow.
young, arrogant kids, and you think you got to figure it out. And we didn't. And so we ended up losing everything as a result of it.
Oh man,
Yeah.
that's nuts.
Yeah.
Okay. So you were brave enough to push forward and stay in entrepreneurship. So
You know, well, you guys know it. You guys know the drill. You know, when you can't sit still and your mind, you know, you're constantly thinking about stuff, you go off and you have what Gerber referred to as an entrepreneurial seizure. And
Yeah.
so I
Yep.
seem to have a pattern of doing that. And so I started other businesses. I had a nightclub, and I ended up with a cleaning and restoration business that I had for several years, and leveraged that into a consulting, into Viola Management Associates, a
Yeah.
consulting career that I've been at for 34 years.
yeah, well, that's great. Yeah, 34 years. I think of, I mean, Larry and I do some coaching, not nearly 34 years worth. And I just think of like how much I hear and learn from our clients, and you sitting there going, holy moly, I didn't even know somebody could do that,
Yeah.
or would do that. So I can only imagine all of the people that you've coached over the years and your coaches have coached over the years, and the stories. We could do a whole like
Oh, yeah.
multi-episode show on just crazy stories, I'm
Crazy
sure.
stories that you wouldn't believe. I can't make
There
this
is
up,
no
man.
doubt.
But anyway, you know, you know, you could tell reading this book that this book is the culmination of those 34 years in dealing with all of us crazy entrepreneurs and all of our
And me.
hang-ups and mental health issues and craziness and, you know, whatever else, right?
I make the comment in the book that, you know, I write the stuff looking in the mirror. I
Yeah.
see myself in those things. So
Yeah. Yeah. So what prompted you to write the book? Because, you know, this is it's different than a lot of, you know, there's a lot of business books out there, right? But I think for the like you always say, the closely held business, for the closely held business owner, this book really is a reality check for guys like us.
yeah.
You don't
Yeah,
usually find those on the shelves. It's more
oh,
theory. This is much more practical.
yeah, there's not. Yep, this is pretty practical. You know, in answer to your question, I think there's really two drivers in this thing. Number one is to help small business owners. You know, I've witnessed the frustration both with myself, but also with clients in trying to address many of the same business issues, but not recognizing the underlying behavioral issues that led to them. And until those are addressed, it doesn't matter how many band-aids or how much lipstick you put on the problem, it isn't going to go away. But I think the other one, and I don't know how you guys are, but I've done a lot of writing, and there are times when there is a topic that that I feel needs to be written, and it feels like it grabs me by the collar and just says, okay, I'm not letting go until you put this on paper.
Yeah.
And this was one of those, and I had to write it, I had to get it out and write it out, and that's how it came about.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, it's interesting when reading the book, and Larry and I had a discussion, you know, while we were putting the outline together, you know, we're reading the book going, oh, did you read that? That hurt. Or did you read that? Oh, remember when we used to be
Oh,
that way?
man.
You know, and one of the things that we see, you know, we have people reach out to us and say, well, how did you build a restoration company like that? And this and that. And, you know, we'll go help people, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. And you go in, like maybe they'll say, hey, can you come over and check out my business? You know, maybe it's in the next town over. And you within 15 minutes, you're like, you're the problem. You know, I mean, it's obvious. It's not your people, it's not your equipment, it's not your marketing,
Yep.
it's you. You know. So what percentage of businesses, and I know this can go for many different sizes, what percentage do you think the owner is that limiting factor to whatever their next level may be?
I'm going to go out on a limb and say 100%.
Yeah.
You know, at the end of the day, you know, we build businesses. Small businesses are lifestyle businesses. Okay, we build them to our own level of comfort, confidence, and competence. I mean, really, that's what we do.
Yeah.
And when we get comfortable enough, we stop growing them. And when we get uncomfortable enough, we grow them again, or we get out. But that's really what they are. So in small businesses, and when I'm saying small businesses, I'm talking up to $50 million, $70 million and under. we are the bottleneck. We are at the top of that thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's start going into the 6 behaviors that we often all share and are the bottleneck, right?
Yeah.
Let's begin with the first one, blurred vision. What did you mean exactly by entrepreneurs having blurred vision?
Blurred vision naturally changes over time as the business grows, but the blurred vision basically is that we, as the founders or as the owners of the business, don't have, or we don't articulate a clear picture of where we want the business to go. Now, this isn't always bad, as I point out in there. It can be a strength in the early years at the launch phase when we're just kind of experimenting with things and trying lots of different things, not being burdened with any one thing or with tunnel vision. But as our businesses grow and we rely on the people within our organizations to help us grow them, if we don't articulate what it is that we want to accomplish, and if we don't ask them their opinions and integrate their opinions into where we're going, then we end up with people in our organization who we've tasked with responsibilities or measurables, if you want, but they don't have any idea what measurables they're supposed to be delivering because they have no idea where we're going.
Right.
And so then we get frustrated. They're frustrated because we keep changing the list, sometimes on a daily basis, sometimes on an annual basis. And so we end up, unfortunately, too often with people on board who either get frustrated or burn out or they just leave.
Yeah. It kills your culture.
Oh,
Totally.
Or these guys are just working it.
Larry and I have done
average
we've done
capacity.
all of
Just-
this.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. We used to do the thing too, where we would go to a conference and then, absorb all this new information for 3 or 4 days and come back and literally like have a 4-minute meeting and going, we're changing everything this week.
Now.
And then every time Larry and I would leave after that, you could see it in their eyes, like, oh, when they
Here
come
they
back,
come.
it's going to be so bad. And we learned, but the thing is that the guys who survived, we learned like, okay, we can't do that anymore. Like we can't do that to them. So Larry and I used to stay an extra day after every conference at the hotel, and we would take all the notes, and then we would figure out, well, what's the one thing we learned this week that we could implement in the next 90 or 120 days? And we'd come back and have a meeting and say, okay, guys, do you all agree that this one thing would really help us? But Chuck, it took us years to get to that point.
And you have conferences also, Chuck. You probably have guided people not to do what we did.
Yeah, we do strategic planning retreats every fall, all right, for clients as well as for non-clients, anybody that wants to come and lay out their business plan. And you can see it, Larry, to your point, you can see, excuse me, from the time somebody's there for the first time to the time, and usually they're there alone the first time. And then suddenly the second year, you see them bringing a trusted person. The third year, if they're large enough, they bring a couple people. And you can see the quality of the content that goes into their plan and the follow-up, the execution piece. That's so critical. I mean, a plan is great to start with. Without the execution, it's useless.
Yeah.
But you can see it.
So why do you think in the first place the owners get this blurred vision? They're kind of ADD to begin with, and they see shiny objects and just want to go after that, or they are playing their cards close to their chest and they are paranoid to let people know what they're thinking?
Well,
or both.
Certainly both of those, Eric. The one about holding their cards close to their vest, absolutely. And I think, as I mentioned in the book, if the people in the organization knew how dicey things were on a fairly regular basis, they'd probably be dusting off their resumes and looking for positions elsewhere.
Yeah.
But I also think that there's an element of, I don't know how to do this. I don't know, for a new business owner, I don't know how to write a strategic plan. It sounds fancy, sounds complicated. It doesn't have to be. Right. Even in larger organizations, it does not have to be complicated, should not be complicated. And so they don't know how to write them. But, that's a learned skill. But I think that's part of it. I think holding the cards close to the vest. And I don't want to give it up.
If employees knew how how often we were all winging it
Oh,
and
yeah.
learning on the fly, they would be out of there.
Yeah. Some people call that the imposter syndrome, and I get it.
Yeah, yeah. Larry and I felt that all the time.
Yeah.
We're like, geez, what are we gonna do? I don't know. So you learn quick.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Well, let's go on to no accountability. We've been guilty of this, Larry, you and I. So what, Chucker, what are you saying is like, we don't want accountability because kind of the reason we started the business in the first place is we didn't want to be accountable to anybody else to begin with. Is
Yep. That's a big part of it. Once again, I think it's one of those issues where we don't know how to be accountable to the people around us. And part of the reason is because we started this thing because we were tired of being accountable to somebody else. And so we don't want to be accountable to the people in my organization, to customers, to markets, any of that stuff. We talk a good game. All right. And ego plays part in this.
Yeah, so much. That's what I got out of it. Yeah, because
Yeah.
I don't have to do this. I'm the owner. Why would I have to do this? I'm paying the bills.
It's interesting that you resonated with that, Larry.
Yeah, imagine that. Call me out. It's okay. That's what this podcast is about.
Do I need to draw your attention to the signature at the bottom of your paycheck kind of thing?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. We've all played that card once or twice.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Larry and I, you probably see this with partners a lot. Like Larry and I went to Icon, which was the Infusionsoft big annual conference because we used Infusionsoft. And there was a lady who had basically what was a Myers-Briggs test that we all took, but it broke it down to like 48 instead of 16 little, boxes that you were in. And Larry's came up Maverick. And mine came up field general, which, if you know Larry and I, that's very much how we operate. And
Wow.
I just remember looking at Larry going, you just can't help yourself, can you? Like, because I would always be trying to put in systems and say, and Larry and I would have our owners meeting. I'd be like, look, we have to do the systems that I'm implementing because if we don't do them, nobody's going to do them. And Larry really struggled with that because he was like, well, dude, the whole reason I started a business is I don't want rules.
But take a look at the strength of both of those styles and probably together, working together.
Yeah.
It was
at one
good.
point in your business, they were probably both real strengths. But as you grow businesses that you do not want dependent on you, you have to give some of that up.
Yeah. And that's what we learned.
Just as you alluded to, Eric, I am not convinced that you ever really get rid of that behavior.
Yeah.
I think, as with any emotional intelligence, you recognize that it exists and you manage it.
Yeah, well, that's what you do. You get coached, or you realize
Correct.
that, I need to follow some rules because that's what will get me to the next level.
Yeah.
Where my behavior and my leadership skills are going to help dramatically if I do that. So
Correct.
it hit us eventually right in the face.
Yeah, I mean, just to point out to all the listeners, Larry figured it out. It's just he always. I mean, Larry, you want to be more independent than others. So, Chuck, how do you think that manifests itself in a really negative? Like, give us some examples of maybe what you've seen with people that are just so, don't want accountability. How's that affecting those businesses on a micro level, I guess?
And I'm glad you said micro level because that's where I wanted to start, Eric. If you take a look at it, it's in little bitty things, little bitty behaviors that we manifest this. Showing up for meetings on time, prepared, consistently, returning phone calls, returning emails. That's a very small demonstration of accountability. As an owner, I have an accountability to respond to you, to answer a question, to respect your time by showing up on time. That's a very small way. When you get into larger organizations or larger demonstrations of it, it can have to do with establishing hard targets that everybody's going to run at, including you, the owner. And a lot of times we avoid establishing those hard targets simply because we don't want to be held accountable.
Well, and we're also afraid that if we don't meet the benchmark that we're asking everybody else to make, then how are we going to lead them?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But by not establishing them, I mean,
yeah, it's chaos.
it is chaos.
Yeah. No, I see this a lot too. You see guys, and I think a lot of that is why people don't want to put systems in place.
Mhm.
I mean, we all know that business systems are essentially the foundation of the beginning
backbone
of
of
scaling
everything.
your business, right? I mean, that's the first thing, when it's time to start growing and scaling, you're like that becomes apparent quickly. Like we need systems so everybody knows what they're doing. But in those systems comes accountability, like you said, all these little mini accountabilities for everybody, including the owner, and the owner's chafing at that idea, going, I don't want to do that,
And they wrote the system.
Exactly.
Totally.
That's the ironic part about it. Cause I remember I'm like, okay, I told everybody to do this. I don't feel like doing it.
Well,
Ask-
and come
ask
on, every
any-
owner loves systems as long as they don't apply to them.
That's it. Ask the office manager or whoever's responsibility for maintaining the systems or for collecting data from the systems, who the worst offender is in the company. Invariably, it's the owner.
For Larry and I, Chuck, the thing that helped us the most start to overcome this, and overcoming it was a journey. It wasn't a destination. We never actually reached full accountability, I'm sure. But when we started doing a lot of intensive disc training with literally every single person in our company, a lot of that behavior changed because we empowered them to hold us accountable. Because I'll use myself as an example. Very big picture person, high D, horrible follow through, don't like details. I'm the worst. I'll fully admit it. But like the office manager or our mitigation managers or whatever, I'd say, look, when you see me doing this, even if it's in front of the warehouse kid, you can call me out. Like I'm self-aware enough now that I can look the warehouse kid in the eye and go, hey kid, I'm not good at this. I need help.
Yeah.
It wasn't until Larry and Larry had his own, versions of that too. It wasn't like DISC freed us from, like you said, almost that imposter syndrome where we're pretending we're good at everything. We finally were through DISC, we're able to go, look, I'm terrible at this. So I need your help. And what's that do? It makes a better culture that go, oh, I want to help you.
But don't overlook, Eric, I understand what you're saying and agree with what you're saying. Don't overlook the work that you or both of you had to do on your ego in order to get to a point where you would not only accept input, but solicit input from the people in your organization. That is something that many business owners don't want to do.
Yeah. And that probably was the most important thing. We just one day, and we say this often, one day we said, you know what? Everything that happens is our fault. And you just have to own everything and ask for help when necessary.
You referenced Jocko Willink's extreme ownership, and that was for Larry and I the turning point for when things got a lot better, because it was the day that when the kid crashes the van 80 miles from the shop, and Larry and I had to look at each other and not say, what's wrong with that kid? And then go, he crashed the van and it's our fault. Well, how could it be our fault? He's 80 miles away. We didn't train him. We didn't teach him how to drive the van. The van needed better time. Like, who knows what it is, but it's our fault.
Yep.
That's, hard to get to, but liberating.
Oh, yeah.
In a way.
Yeah.
Because then all the excuses are just gone and you're just like, well, there's no such thing as problems. There's just more work to do. I mean, yeah. Okay. The next one is near and dear to Larry's heart and mine, Larry, my heart. Heroic managing. Chuck, if any chapter of this book hit me square between the eyes, it was this one.
As it should have.
Right back at you, buddy. Before Chuck, I really want your input, but if I could tell you a couple stories of Larry and I with heroic managing. So Howard Partridge was Larry and my coach nearly the whole time we were in business. And Howard's the one that got us really going on DISC, and I went and got Maxwell leadership trained. It wasn't so much the nuts and bolts of a restoration company, because that's not what he does. It was the working on us that we were getting a lot out of. And Larry, in heroic managing, his idea was to be the fireman. Like we even do videos now where Larry has a fireman's outfit on, because every time he'd hear that there's a problem anywhere in Southern California, he would stop marketing, put on the fireman's outfit, and drive over, and I'm using air quotes, fix it. You know?
Wow.
And it got so bad that at one point I was like, you know, because I'm trying to build systems and accountability and structure. I'm the field general guy, right? And the opportunity cost of not marketing is not helping us grow. So I actually called Howard and I'm like, if you don't get out here, help me fix Larry. I'm leaving.
They're going to kill me.
I wasn't going anywhere, but I was like, I'm leaving. I'm out of here. I can't take it. And, you know, so Howard went and worked with Larry on stopping doing that. But that was Larry's heroic managing.
Yeah.
Mine was to be the smartest guy in the room, that I'm the expert on everything. And, you know, Howard, I think 70% of the sentences that Howard ever says start with, let me ask you a question. Yeah, that's all he says. Let me ask you a question. I would start with, you know what you need to do? You know? And I wasn't allowing anybody to ever grow because they could abdicate their responsibility on a job site to me without having to think, and then it's my fault.
Absolutely.
And I got the adrenaline rush of, gosh, I'm smart. God, I'm figuring it all out for everybody.
Yeah, so smart.
You know, I just wanted to give like some context to whoever's listening to, like, that's how we did it. So is that, my question to you now is that the common thing? Those two things, are those common, or is it different than that, or maybe some of the styles of heroic managing?
Well, there's a lot of different styles as you're suggesting, but those are two common ones that you're describing. Absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, you have the firefighter mentality, but you've also got a command and control mentality. And if Willink and didn't point out anything else in that book, they pointed that out, that the command and control thing doesn't work anymore, that you have to have buy-in. But you have the heroic the command and control, but you've also got the thing that you were referring to, the smartest guy in the room. And as many small business owners, they take great personal satisfaction, and they bring a lot of psychic value to themselves by wrapping themselves up in that cape of being the smartest guy in the room. And what they don't realize is that they are restricting the growth of their business to just the decisions that they can make by themselves. They're comfortable with that. You also run into a totally different level of that whole command and control, the whole heroic managing thing, when you get into family businesses, where they're transitioning from, say, the parents down to siblings or down to progeny. It's a totally different dynamic there, but it's essentially the same concept.
Is that where the dad who starts the business just never really lets, like, let's say the sons and daughters fully make decisions because he's like, I started this out of my garage and built it to 40 million. Like, what could you possibly know that I don't? Is it that?
Yeah. And, and they don't give it up. Too often they don't give it up until they have the chest thumper that puts them in a grave. And now all of a sudden the progeny is there, faced with having to grow a business that they know very little about from a leadership perspective. Because dad changed their diaper. What can they know about running a business?
Yeah.
Chuck, are there statistics? Are there statistics on how few of those businesses where the founder does that actually doesn't make it? I mean, is there data on that? Okay.
Yeah, that I'm
it
sure
must
there
be
are.
high.
I don't have that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
You'd have to just sell at that point.
Correct.
If you're sellable.
Yep. If you're sellable, right.
Yeah,
exactly.
Larry and I used to always talk about, like, it's also the double endorphin whammy, right? So let's say Larry goes and he leaves his marketing position, puts his fireman's outfit on, runs over, and Larry will fix everything, right? I mean, we started in Larry's garage. He knows how to fix it, right?
Yeah.
But then, so he's the hero. He gets the endorphin rush of going over and fixing it. But then he gets to come back to the office and bitch and moan and be the victim as well. If these guys knew what they were doing, I wouldn't have to do this and I could have marketed all day. So it's like, and then you get all the people going, oh, poor you. So it's almost like you get it twice.
Yeah, absolutely. We're self-righteous. I mean, we get to wrap ourselves up in that. I like the double endorphin thing. I'm going to have to use that, Eric.
It's all yours.
The whole thing, I was pissing off our staff so much. They're like, oh my God, this guy comes in here every time. I can't even do anything without him coming here and stepping all over me. And I finally realized that one of our managers was so mad at me. I'm like, what are you mad at? I just helped you out. He's like, no, get out of the way. I can do this. You're driving me crazy. I'm ready to quit. And I was like, oh, and I was good friends with him as well. And it just hit me right in the face. I said, okay.
Yeah,
so that was what started my journey, getting out of the way.
Yeah.
That's good.
The other thing is that this is an ego thing too, right? So, I mean, the double endorphins an ego thing, the righteousness is an ego thing, but also just getting to the point where you acknowledge that they're better than you are at that position. Like that's hard to do, especially when you started from nothing and then you've started to scale it on some level. We were on a podcast and I think the guy said that only 3% of all small businesses ever make it to 7 figures.
Yep.
I don't know if that's true or not. Right. So let's say you made it to a few million a year. So you're in the top 2% or whatever. So you're proud of yourself and you're thumping your chest saying, look what I did. I started with literally, $5,000 in a van or whatever. And to get to the point where you can look at every person pretty much in your company and go, you're a better carpet cleaner than I am. You're a better mitigation technician than I ever was. You're a better MIT manager. You're a better estimator, because that's what happens. Don't you think? I mean, because entrepreneurs are generalists. We generally get by doing good enough on everything and not amazing on. That's what I realized several years in. I said to them in a meeting, I was like, just so you know, like you're all better at your job than I've ever been. It took me a lot to say that actually. And that's when it started for me. And I think Larry too, where we started saying, instead of saying, this is what you need to do. It's like, well, what do you think we should do? Because Steve Jobs says that. He said something to the effect of, it's insane to hire people to do a job and tell them what to do. They should be telling us how we should do it.
Yes. And then we coordinate it. So, Eric, there's an element to that, to the whole heroic managing thing that I did not write about in the book. I'm in the middle of writing a piece right now on transitioning. And what I have found is that while we look at reasons that owners engage in heroic managing, we talk about ego and we talk about control. There's also, I think there's a piece that many of us as human beings, but as business owners, I think we really do, we struggle with the whole notion of transition. And part of transition, any transition, really involves 3 steps. The first one is abandoning the activity that we were engaged in before. We could control that. I was comfortable with it. I understood it. But when we abandon that to move to a different place in our business or to grow a larger business, the abandoning of that automatically leads to chaos. And many of us, in spite of how we're hardwired, we're not really good with chaos or ambiguity, but that's a natural outcrop of abandoning the thing that we were doing before. It's to be expected. And it's only by going through that we're able to embrace that next thing that we're moving toward. So rather than suffering through that pain, we just say, you know what, I'm not going to do it. Few of us say it out loud or even recognize it, but at the end of the day, that's what's really going on. And so we're trying to avoid that pain, go back to the comfort thing, trying to avoid the pain by not changing, by still controlling everything.
Well, that's where the quality coaching comes in, because, have you as a coach or, teaching them, okay, this is going to be rough. You're going to get through it and let's make a plan so it's not as rough as it could be.
Right.
And shoot you out the other side where you're winning.
Yeah. People are going to screw up. You're not going to go out of business. Right.
Well, no, that's a great point. I mean, if you really think about the heroic managing, you just kind of really hit a nerve with me. So much of that is based on fear. You're so afraid if they make a mistake, they're going to make you look bad. They're going to make the company look bad. And, you know, you have to get past that to grow because they are going to make mistakes. And, you know, owners generally, at least from what I can see, the guys I'm friends with and know, and Larry, we're way too harsh on the team and hold them to standards that we could never live up to ourselves.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's like that guy did this, and you know, and Larry would look at me and be like, "I've seen you do that 15 times."
Oh, yeah. Oh,
You
yeah.
know? Like, well,
Yep.
yeah, but that doesn't count.
Yep. I was learning. Well, so was he.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Let him learn.
Yeah.
I
my
learned
gosh.
that from, I had an amazing entrepreneur boss before we started our restoration company. I was there about 10 years, and he was a guy that he just understood that you had to groom young talent. And I mean, I made mistakes that cost this company so much money. And I'd be like, I'm fired. Yeah. I'm thinking he's asking to come see me. I'm like, I'm done. I like this job. This sucks because I really liked it. And then he'd look me in the eye and say, what happened? And I'd say, oh, well, you know, I did this or that. And he'd look at me and goes, well, you won't do that again.
Yeah.
You know, and then he might have followed up with, if I was in your shoes, I think I would have done this or I would have done that. And then he'd move me on. He'd say, just go. You know, I need you to go learn this quickly. Just don't make those same mistakes again. And it's like, that's what I took from him more than any lesson as an entrepreneur, was to not be fearful of that.
Yeah. Yeah. I like to ask the question whenever there's been a big screw up, regardless of what it is, what did we learn from it? And I mean, literally, we. Okay, not only did the person who made the mistake learn something, I should have learned something in the process as well.
Yeah, well, you usually learn that your training's not on point, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I do. I'd show up at a job and I'd be like, "What in the world? Why is it set up like this?" And I'd be like, "Oh, that's on me. I'm obviously not spending enough time with these guys, or I need to be away from my desk and out here a little bit more, or whatever it might be, or I need a manager to do that, or you know, whatever."
Absolutely.
All right, well, let's move into one. We talked about this on the last podcast a little bit, but let's talk about e-drift, because I'm a major. I have a problem with this too.
Yeah, so do I. What can I tell you about it?
Larry's not as bad. Larry's better about this. So Chuck, what is e-drift and how does it manifest in people's companies?
You know, entrepreneurial drift is typically I'll use the word scattered because I'm an entrepreneur too, scattered or easily distracted personalities of entrepreneurs, of small business owners, where we chase shiny things, squirrel, okay, and we'll chase it. And what happens when we do that, and we have that for several reasons, but when we do it, it becomes hugely discouraging to the people in our organizations, because typically they don't have time to get the traction that they need to get the results in their department or in their position that we've asked them to accomplish. We're constantly changing the game plan. And you know, we can have it because we classically have attention deficit disorder, but it doesn't have to be that. It can just be an easily distracted personality style that we have.
Or you love the adrenaline rush of starting something new.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I have this idea, and if I could put this in play, it's a game changer, you know, and you just go.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. The first consultant I hired when I was a 33-year-old business owner must have recognized that characteristic in me. We didn't have a term for it at that time, but I remember vividly him asking me the question when I had this other business opportunity that I just knew was going to be hugely successful. In addition to my business, my cleaning and restoration business at the time, he asked me one question, and he said, "Is it going to make $1 million?" And I said, "I don't know. Why?" He goes, "Because it's going to cost you one. Okay, it's going to cost you in terms of distraction from your current business. Okay, you can't drive two different companies at this size. It's going to cost you relationships with people, not the least of which is your family, because of the time you're going to spend away from the business." And he said, you know, stick to your knitting. That was his comment. That was wise advice.
And all right, but let's go back to 33-year-old Chuck. Did you fight him?
Oh.
Or did you just go, okay, you're right?
Well, I didn't buy that business, But I
Okay.
can tell you right now that, and I joke about this, I am convinced that part of the reason that I started my consultancy was, e-drift. I had an opportunity, I took the opportunity. And so while I feel that the outcome was great, and I think at its heart, it was the right thing to do because I was able to live out my passion. I'm certain that there was an element of e-drift, a big element of e-drift to it.
Yeah.
I get called on it here at VMA. If I come up with an idea that, is off track, invariably one of my managers will come to me and go, "Hey boss, we having an e-drift moment here? Because I do not see that on the plan." So,
It's so humbling.
oh yeah.
Oh,
You're just like, darn it, I've done it again.
Yeah.
and then you
I've
resist
learned
it too. You're
nothing.
like, wait a minute. This is really good. I know it's a little easier, but come on, work
Makes
with me
all the
here.
sense in the world. Absolutely.
Yeah.
From now on, Chuck, they're just going to put a copy of the book on your desk when you're doing that. Just bookmark the page to start the e-drift chapter.
I will look for that.
Oh man. Yeah, I'm super guilty of e-drift.
I think it's an amazing part of the personality though, because you're always thinking, you're always creating, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I hope people don't think that it's bad because it creates new ideas all the time.
Yeah.
You just have to keep them in focus, within your circles that are the best for you.
Larry, that's exactly right. I mentioned in the book that ADD, literally ADD behavior, a diagnosis of that is not a bad thing. Many people with ADD are hugely creative and highly intelligent. It's when it manifests itself in unproductive ways. As a coach, as a consultant, my job wasn't to medicate my client or to have them get rid of the ADD. It was to channel it into constructive outcomes. And it still is a big task, is to channel that into constructive outcomes.
I hope you don't have to medicate them often.
Larry and I had to get, Larry was talking about the circles, but we literally had to do that, Chuck. We took a whiteboard because we both have e-drift in different ways. And we drew 3 circles and said, what are the 3 things? What are the
Collins.
3 things? Yeah. What are the 3 things that this company does? And then if it didn't fall into those 3 circles, we'd look at each other and go, do we have a 4th circle? I didn't know we had a 4th circle, and, and Larry and I did it differently. Like Larry would be creative out selling. Like all of a sudden we did everything. Like if they had a need, Larry was like, we're in the garage door business today. We can do this. You have tools. I have tools.
How hard can it be?
Where I was like starting a new business in my head every 15 minutes,
That was in the book, Good to Great. Good to Great seemed to hit on a couple really good points. And this was one of them. Okay. We got to keep it in the 3 circles is from that book. Is that Doug Collins? I think
Jim
Collins.
Jim Collins. Yeah. No, it was just a great.
I think he refers to it as a hedgehog.
I'm sorry.
I think Collins refers to it as the hedgehog principle.
Yeah. You want to explain that, Chuck, to the listeners?
Yes, the hedgehog as opposed to the fox.
Yeah.
The hedgehog, the fox does a lot of different things, very sly, very, behind the scenes kind of thing. But the fox also ends up with as a fur coat on an awful lot of people. You take a hedgehog, the hedgehog's job is to eat and to follow one thing, do one thing very well. And you don't see fur coats made out of groundhogs. So they survive.
Yeah.
No. Yep. I always, you can always see that. You can always see that owner who is more like a hedgehog. They stand out to me because they're almost different than the rest of us. The rest of us are like the fox, just running around, being sly, trying to make more money, try to grow. And you always can see that guy. And Larry and I have one guy in particular that I'm thinking about that. They just go into that office and they just plug away every day. And if you ask them, you're like, hey, are you thinking of getting, your plumbing company and doing HVAC? Nope. I'm going to do more plumbing. They just stick to the plan. And, I envy that because I'm not that at all.
I don't have data, hard data to support this, but I can tell you from personal experience, working with a lot of clients over a long period of time, that if you look at the makeup of a business, especially in the early years, you have an owner. In this industry, it's frequently a male, and their first office manager / bookkeeper is frequently who? The spouse.
Yeah.
Okay. And so you look at it for the reasons why, and I ask this in groups. So why do you suppose the owner wants the spouse working for them? And they'll say, well, I trust her. And number two, she works cheap. All right. But then if you turn that question around and you ask the spouse, why did you agree to come to work for this owner, for your husband, basically, or your boyfriend? And they'll say, because I know this guy. Okay. And I know that the family income is dependent on the decisions that he's making. I want to be close to the action. And they
Right.
know that they can help influence their spouse because they're used to them.
Yeah.
And they're one of the few people, if somebody really has a bad case of ADD, you'll see just a revolving door of people in the office who don't understand them, don't know how to work with them, and they're not in love with them to work through that process, whereas the spouse is. So it's very common in small businesses to have
And
that.
if you look at a disc profile, the majority, the largest percentage of people are S's, and they need stability and safety in their life.
Yep.
And that ADD person is the absolute opposite of that.
Correct.
And often office staff are S's, very, very commonly. So we'd see that. Larry and I would be doing stuff, and we'd look at the office, and you could just see it in their face whether we were hitting the mark or not, because they either looked happy or terrified. Nothing in between. All right, well, let's talk about hiding out.
Yep.
We all do that too.
We do hide out, and we hide out from a lot of different things and in a lot of different ways. When hiding out basically means I'm not going to ask the tough questions because I don't want the answers I may be getting, because it means I may have to get involved in a difficult conversation with somebody. And as a friend of mine out of the East Coast who owns a very successful vent cleaning business made the comment to me years ago. He says, Chuck, in my opinion, most small business owners are nice guys who got lucky. And I agree with him. And the downside, nothing wrong with that, but the downside to that is that frequently we don't want to have to make tough calls. We don't want to have to get into confrontational conversations because we want to be nice guys. We want people to like us.
Yeah.
So rather than doing that, I'm going to hide out from asking the questions.
I think too, like, especially in the current climate, I mean, it's been this way for several years. I hear this from my friends, they'll be like, I can't go just have these hard conversations because I don't have anybody to replace that guy with.
Yep.
Like, I can't piss him off because,
Right.
He's a master plumber. And if he leaves my plumbing company, I'm doomed. There's nobody just waiting to come. So how do you do that? Because Larry and I, look, we've all done this. It's like, I really want to go and review that guy because he's got all these issues and they're driving us crazy and they're hurting our company and they're hurting our culture and they're making us angry. But boy, if we lose him, I'm back on the truck or the manager's on the truck and I'm taking the manager's spot or whatever it might be. Right. How do you not hide out and yet not blow up your business in that way?
Yeah. Start small, start when issues are small, before they get big. That's tough. Easy to say, very difficult to do because it's contrary to our nature. But when we let things escalate, then we really do have a confrontational thing. If we start when they're small, it's a conversational thing. So start with that. And then understand the party you're talking to and understand yourself. And what's the best way to approach this, both from their perspective as well as from your perspective. So start with that. And also, what you look at, let's go back to the accountability piece. Does the person you're talking to actually know what they're accountable for? Have you clearly articulated that to them? Then there should be no mystery about what the conversation's about. They can do a better job of self-managing.
Yeah. What about hiding out from your accounting? That's pretty common. I can't tell you how many times in the early days, Larry and I would be on a job at midnight and just like we've been working all day, we're working all night. We seem so busy and we'd look at each other and go, think we're making any money?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Everybody said that before. I don't care who they are. Like, I know that's true. Like, you just going, and you're just like, I'm avoiding the books because I'm doing the work so I don't have to go do the books.
Ah, what a great point. And that's exactly right. But too often when we don't view ourselves as numbers guys, but that's no excuse. And you don't need to understand accounting. You need to understand the story. I just did a video on this. You need to understand the stories behind the numbers. Don't worry about the accounting. Don't worry about financial terms. A lot of times we're frightened by financial terms.
Yeah.
We've had bad experiences with it. Learn to ask the questions that will reveal the stories behind the numbers. Now, all of a sudden, they make sense in everyday terms, terms that anybody can understand. That's when you remove the mystery and the fear. You stop hiding out.
Yeah. I had a restoration company that I was doing some work with, and they were really busy. And I said to the owner, so where are you at? Are you ahead of last year? Where are your numbers? Where's your net? He looked at me and goes, it was like April, right? He goes, won't know till the end of the year. And I'm like, how could that be? He goes, well, I have all these big projects and some of them will go 3 or 4 months. And I'm thinking, it doesn't matter. You should know where you are.
Right.
Larry and I, we hired a full-time bookkeeper who was also, had a degree in accounting, and she would make us sit there every Wednesday night after everybody went home, and we would sit for 2 hours and go line by line by line. And what's interesting though, is when we stopped hiding out, all of a sudden we realized, well, if we know exactly where we are, we can make changes to head all the problems off at the pass, and then we kind of looked at each other. Larry, correct me if I'm wrong. We're like, why did we hide from this for so long? Why were we so fearful of this? Even if the numbers this month aren't great, like at least we know where we're at.
Exactly.
Larry, how did you feel about that? Like, you like doing that less than me, I think, but still, neither of us liked it. But
yeah, because it was we always wanted to spend more money on things with different staff. Hey, this guy's great. Let's give him a little bit of raise. We can squeeze that in there. Or, hey, this great marketing opportunity came up. Let's throw a couple grand at that because that's going to make things happen. And we would justify it in different ways. But when we looked at our numbers in detail, like, oh, these percentages are quite significant. Maybe we shouldn't be throwing numbers at this or that. And it would hold us accountable. That's what the numbers did, was hold us accountable, in my mind.
Mm.
As humans, especially in our society, we live in a quantitative society. We like to measure things. We track all kinds of measurements in real life, okay? Whether it's sports or whether it's vehicles or whatever it is, we track numbers. When we can gamify the numbers in a business, and you can, make it a game, okay? Understand, again, I'm going to go back to look at the stories behind the numbers. Don't worry about accounting. Focus on the stories. All of a sudden now, a lot of the fear and mystery, they're removed, and we're much more likely to not hide out.
Yeah, no, it's true. Yeah, don't hide, everybody. We've all done it, and there's no good end to it.
Yeah,
no, there is no good end to it.
All right, last one.
Oh, this is the toughest one.
This is the hard one, man. Swollen ego. Swollen ego. We've all got that.
Yeah.
All right, Chuck. How does this hurt our businesses?
How long do I have?
As long as you need.
Yeah.
Buckle up, Larry. We're gonna get blasted right now.
Well, I think the important thing is to separate arrogance from ego. The ego can be very subtle in the way that it plays out in our businesses. As subtle as going back to heroic managing. I don't want to get out of my own way. I want to make all the decisions. It can be subtle in the sense that I don't want to ask opinions because I don't want you to be smarter than me. I don't want your opinion. I've already got all the answers. So we don't even solicit it. But where you also see it come into play is on a grander scale where it does morph into arrogance or even into hubris. And hubris being that we're making business decisions based on the way that we want to feel rather than informed data. And when we're making decisions based on our ego or based on how we want to feel, I'll tell you what, we're in a world of hurt. And I can tell you with confidence that when I encounter a client, when I have encountered a client that has an ego that is out of control and is making business decisions based on that, it is never an issue of if they will go out of business or stall. It's just a matter of timing, just a matter of when. And all you have to do is look at the writings of just about any recognized business author, Jim Collins certainly being a leading one, to understand that I'm not the only guy who's noticed that. They notice it in multi-million-dollar corporations. I notice it in small businesses. And I think it plays out faster in small businesses because you're so much closer to the wind.
Yeah.
So
So I have a question about that. We did a podcast about masculinity with Bruce Deloach 3 or 4 months ago. And when we were doing it, I said, Bruce, I don't think anybody's going to listen to this. Like, this topic's going to freak people out and they're going to think we're soft or whatever, right? It's like our second or third most listened to episode.
I'll bet.
So my question to you is, what role does masculinity play in this swollen ego? Because so many owners in our kind of world tend to be men.
Yeah.
Do you think it plays a role?
No, it plays out differently. It would be a mistake to think that women don't have egos that are out of control. They do. It manifests itself slightly different than it does in a guy. And I think in a guy, and I'll use the word, I know that the term is popular now, privilege. I'll talk about it as male privilege.
Okay.
Males are conditioned in our society, okay? Males are conditioned to be the decision makers, to be the power, to be in power. And so we don't recognize how it plays out because it's the air that we've breathed our entire lives. And it's only when someone has the courage to bring it to our attention, and it takes a ton of courage to do that, that we become aware of it. Too often in businesses, the person that has the courage to bring it to the boss's attention ends up with former in front of their title, or they get marginalized within the business. Nobody wants that. As a business owner, as a business consultant, we refer to that humorously internally as the fire the consultant conversation.
Right.
And it does happen that way.
Yeah.
Frequently we get fired.
So how does swollen ego manifest itself in women differently than men?
You see a lot of it.
I'm just curious about that.
I'm sorry?
I'm just curious about that, like what you would look for.
I look at it, it shows itself as more subtly than it does in men. Men aren't afraid to be, what's the word I want to use here? Outwardly expressive about it. Women are more inclined to hold it internally. A lot of times they will use analysis of things. In other words, I need more time to make these decisions. Whereas maybe what's really happening here is they're manifesting heroic managing. I want to be able to control decisions internally. I'm not going to tell you, no, your idea sucks. I'm going to say, I need to consider this further. But really, at the end of the day, it gets down to an ego that's at play here.
Yeah.
So that's one of the ways that I see it on a much more subtle basis.
Interesting.
You still get it outwardly, but not as often.
Let me ask you something, Chuck. What are the characteristics, just like maybe the top 3 characteristics, you see somebody that's so ego driven, they're just going to be driving their business into the ground at some point?
Yeah, not listening, good question. I think one of them is making decisions, making risky decisions, okay, that really should not be made. So whether it's an equipment purchase, whether it's an expansion of the business, adding on a new service that hasn't really been considered and evaluated to see what the outcome is. Is it going to bring value to the customers? Is it going to bring value to the business rather than just make you feel good? So a lot of it, Larry, comes into the decision making that they have. Unfortunately, I think I have seen it play out in the manner in which they address people. They can bring a condescending tone to their voice and the way that they address the people in their organization, taking an unhealthy parental tone to the people in their organization, or just a I don't care about you tone in it. And then the third one would be not following through on the promises that we made. Our ego leads us to believe that we're above it. I'm the owner of the business. I know I made the promise, but sure do you understand that this is an executive privilege that I have, that I don't have to follow through on that. I don't know if those are the top three, but there are three that come to the top of my mind right off the bat. None of them are attractive, nor appreciated by the people in our organizations.
I can relate to all three of them, actually.
Well, unfortunately, I can too.
Me too.
But if you're aware of them, of course, you can keep them in control, relatively speaking, of course.
Correct.
Because you need some ego to run your business, to have the control and make decisions moving forward if they're not risky and indecisive. But
there's a fine line between that confidence, Larry, that you're talking about, which is driven by ego, and then just getting into arrogance. Yeah.
Because that's can
The
get crazy.
parental thing struck with me too, that our team behind our back used to call Larry and I mom and dad. If you're not getting what you want from Larry, you go to Eric. If you're not getting what you want from Eric, like they would play us off each other. But we were bringing that on because we were acting parental, because most of our staff were roughly the age of our kids.
Mm.
So that probably brought an ego with it in its own right,
Yeah, but I don't think that goes away. I think that as a business owner, at least with me, I think there still is that parental caring.
Yeah.
But it's the parental tone that you want to.
It's a double-edged sword.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the not listening thing, I think that's got to be the main common denominator for a lot of us. It's like, I know better. I know better. And the reason everybody told me never to start this business, and it's fine. So therefore I must be right all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because what happens when you start a business? Everybody tells you you're not going to make it, or it's not going to go, or it's a bad idea.
Family members.
And what do?
Friends.
You don't listen. So your entrepreneurial journey is based on not listening to other people's input.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you have some success. So that's buttressing your idea that, see, I shouldn't listen to anybody because they were all wrong at the beginning. Now we're doing, X amount of million and there's 20 people here. I must be right about everything.
Right. And now throw some cash into that drink. All right.
Oh yeah. Well, that magnifies everything, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. You need a deflation bubble for someone's head walking into one of your conferences, so they consult with you guys. Okay, guys, walk into this room. We're going to shrink your head halfway down. We'll be good after that.
So Chuck, what do you think people should do? Because Larry and I had to address our egos, and I'm not saying they ever went away. They certainly didn't. But I mean, you kind of alluded to earlier that we became much less ego driven the longer we were in business.
Yeah.
I think a lot of that just had to do with just getting our butt handed to us enough times where we're like, okay, well, maybe we don't have the answers, all of them. And I think just getting coached as well. But what would you say to the people that they're hearing our conversation going, that might be me. I mean, how do you even begin working on that?
Yeah, great question. I think the first, as with any of the behaviors, any behavior at all, the first one is recognition that it exists. And I'm just going to speak candidly to the folks that are watching this podcast. If you own a business in America, you are automatically, and you're successful automatically, in a high risk category of having an inflated ego. Just accept that fact. Not do I have one, I have one.
Yeah.
And then you start asking, how am I manifesting it to the people in my organization? And this brings me to the remedy, or at least the way that you can address it within your organization. It always comes down to the strong people that you surround yourself with. People who are strong enough to stand toe to toe with you and bring that to your attention respectfully, but bring it to your attention without worrying that they're going to get fired, or that they're going to get marginalized within the organization, or that they're going to make the boss mad, or not pouting, not talking to you. So that's so critical. But recognizing it right up front, that you're at risk. If you own a business, I'm at risk in owning this practice, and being aware of it.
Yeah. If if you look at all 6 of those things, I mean, obviously the book and you and this podcast hopefully is making people aware of, oh, I probably represent all 6 of those things on some level.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is that you need to find, whether it's at the library, on YouTube, with a coach, you need to start working on you.
Yep.
That, right? That the common denominator is us.
Read the book.
Yeah,
read the book. That's a
read
huge
the book,
start.
but you've got to start, the owners that have all these issues you're talking about, my experience is, and Chuck, you can correct me if you think I'm wrong, is they are often very unwilling to start the journey of self-discovery, self-awareness. The one thing that Larry and I had going for us was that we both played sports growing up. I like athletes because they're coachable.
Yep.
When we started our business, we looked at each other and went, we need a coach. Everybody needs a coach. You got to have somebody holding you accountable, right? Athletes are a perfect example of this. They all have egos.
Yep.
You couldn't be Tiger Woods if you don't have a huge ego. Correct. But Tiger Woods also had a swing coach for his entire career. So he's listening to somebody, Yep. And once you let the veneer of your own perfection go, everything gets easier, not harder.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
Larry, do you agree with that too? Did you feel a sense of relief when it's like, I don't have to be perfect for everybody anymore?
Well, that's what the book talks about completely. And that's why it hit home, because I'm like, oh, this is the best stuff. And this would have helped us a lot more early on. And we were always addressing some of these issues, but there were so many things in here that went in depth that were like, oh yeah, I got to address this. And this is a big deal. And you've been doing this for so long, Chuck, it's obvious that these are big issues that many small, whatever size, well, not gigantically, but service business owners can benefit from.
Yeah.
It was really great.
So Chuck, I know we have kind of pre-release copies. When does the book come out and how does everybody get it?
July 15th is the release date, although we just learned that they are releasing some early, but July 15th was the release date. Just go to Amazon.com. It's on Amazon, and that would be an easy place to purchase it.
Okay. And then how to find Violand Management?
Violand.com.
That's easy.
Is where we are. That's our website. Contact us or call us direct, and that's where you find us.
Yeah, I'll put your name and your website and the link to the book and everything in the show notes. So if anybody wants to check anything out, Chuck is a wealth of information. This book was really very cool. It hit a lot of great topics as we've been talking about.
Thanks.
Chuck, as always, it was a pleasure. I could have gone 2 more hours, but nobody's got time for that.
Story after story.
I want to have you on, Chuck, someday just to tell horror stories about no names, just stories.
That would be a ball.
That is the kind of show that I think everybody could benefit from just once, if it stops one person from making that choice.
I'm afraid of how many would be coming from my own experience than my own.
No,
business.
That's even more humbling. That's wonderful. Yeah. That's exactly. We would try and top you. We'd be trying to top each other with personal. We should make the podcast only personal experiences, not other people.
Yeah,
that would be good. That would be awesome.
Well, everybody, go get this book. If you are in business, in any kind of business, it doesn't even have to be the trades or service business. This is must reading, and I think it'd be helpful.
Great.
Thank you.
All right, Chuck, it was wonderful. We appreciate it. Check out our podcast, Blue Collar Nation, on iTunes, anywhere else you want to check it out, and you will definitely benefit from this episode. You guys have a good day. We'll see you.
Take care. Thanks so much.